So let me start out by saying, how grateful I am with your being patient. This bug that I've got, really, I've yet to have been able to kick it, uh, and as a result, everything just seems to take a lot longer for me to do. It's playing havoc with my schedule right now, so I appreciate your patience. Your midterm exam that we're reviewing for here will consist of some 25 multiple choice and true false questions. I don't think that should prove to be too difficult at all. Take as much time as you need to complete the exam. With my being late in getting it to you, I see no reason why you should have to pay the price for that. Uh, I would think you'd want to knock it out before we got to spring break, but really it's up to you with your unique schedule and everything you've got doing and going. So you do whatever you have to do to finish up the exam when possible. Email me if you have any questions. I can be reached at semcgee@alaska.edu. And good luck with your efforts on this particular assessment. So we start out, and if you take a moment to look back at lesson one, you'll see within a couple of the articles that I included there that cyber terrorism and hacking present a huge threat to the transportation industry as a whole, and more specifically to the aviation industry as well. So say that one more time. You'll see that cyber terrorism and hacking present a huge threat to our transportation industry as a whole, and more specifically to the aviation industry. Transportation professionals are part of emergency management teams in a lot of urban areas, but the true potential for transportation in general and in particular to play a significant role in emergency response and evacuation is far from being fully realized. Let me say that again. The idea here is that the individuals who constitute or who make up the transportation professionals within a given jurisdiction are oftentimes parts of emergency management teams in urban areas, but we have yet to have realized the full potential for transportation in general, and in particular, to play a significant role in the emergency response and evacuation needs. That's far from having been realized to date. Just how important are our transportation systems? They're basically essential infrastructures that contribute to economic vitality, growth, and well-being throughout a given country. What about our transportation systems? What do they actually include? Well, they include things like airports and waterports, highways, tunnels, bridges, and passenger and freight rails or trains. Our transportation network is basically this open, soft target, offering terrorists relatively uncomplicated access and easily penetrated security measures. Let me make sure I emphasize this one part. Here we're talking about our surface transportation network. I wasn't sure if I just summed that up by saying transportation systems as a whole. That's not necessarily the case. But when we're talking about surface transportation, roads, trains, those kinds of things, that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying it's a soft target, uncomplicated access, easily penetrated security measures. The aviation security model and security procedures that you saw us implement post 9/11, TSA, secure areas, those kinds of things. Those kinds of mechanisms are not necessarily applicable to our surface transportation systems. Our surface transportation systems really can't be protected in the same way that our commercial aviation industry is protected. Transit agencies and security authorities have to consider this balance, okay? And it's basically a trade-off between security, mobility, and freedom against this idea of negative or expected negative effects of an attack. It's a tough balance, but it's exactly what they look to do on a daily basis. Islamic terrorism takes into account its religious roots, the rulings of Islamic law, Sharia, and the outline of Islamic legal experts in the form of fatwas. Islamic terrorism takes into account its religious roots, the rulings of Islamic law, and the outline of Islamic legal experts. There are some significant concerns regarding our maritime industry and the terrorism threat that is poised in such a way as to do it harm. And really, it comes down to this idea that, again, much like our surface transportation system, it's vast, right? Largely global in nature, unregulated, and somewhat opaque. It's tough to see all of the moving parts. The U.S. government has spent over $90 billion on border security efforts without having a truly objective way of measuring success or even acknowledging failure. We don't really have a mechanism by which to tell whether or not we're doing a good job or not. Terrorism, transnational crime, and illegal immigration are now the three main issues, and let's be honest, somewhat controversial, surrounding U.S. border security efforts. And they largely explain why securing our borders has become more important now than at any other time in history. Securing a border doesn't necessarily mean keeping 100% of everyone and everything from coming across it. That's physically impossible. To do so, or even trying to do so, would bankrupt most countries and create these barriers and the loss from cross-border trade and cultural exchange would be immeasurable. Terrorists, associates of terrorist groups, and those who actively support terrorism, drug traffickers, human traffickers, and smugglers and violent criminals are our enemies when it comes to securing our border. We have to focus the vast majority of our border security apparatus at preventing these types of individuals from attempting to enter our country. You know, and just keep in mind when people get so hung up about terrorism and secure borders and all, you know, the 9/11 hijackers and the Christmas Day underwear bomber guy, they all had valid U.S. visas issued at U.S. consulates and traveled legally to the United States on legally purchased plane tickets. So we have to be careful and be aware of what exactly the threat is that we're trying to stop. Kind of like what I mentioned before, making a border 100% secure is impossible, but it is possible to identify who our enemies really are and to develop a strategy that ensures that we focus our limited resources on preventing those enemies from entering our country unnoticed. The better we understand the concept of border security and all its moving parts, the better we can hold our leaders accountable when they spend our tax dollars on resources that aren't needed or fail to spend them on resources that are critical and engage in fear-mongering and hollow reassurances designed to basically placate voters. In the last 15 years, the number of apprehensions on our southwest border, which is really, when you come down to it, the major indicator of total attempts to cross the border illegally, has declined significantly. It's now less than a third of what it was in the year 2000, and it's at its lowest level since the 1970s. The U.S.-Canada and the U.S.-Mexico borders are two of the busiest land crossings in the world, and they present somewhat of a challenge when it comes to trying to establish a secure border. Recently, a report was released that showed the economic impacts of breaches of maritime security amounted to an estimated $12 billion impact to the shipping industry annually. The recent spike in Somali piracy can be traced to political instability in the region, to the decimation of fishing grounds by foreign fishing vessels, and to the dumping of toxic wastes in Somali waters. All of this resulting in the existence of extreme poverty for the region. Piracy in Somalia is a multifaceted problem that the warships of the international community alone cannot solve. Solving the problem will literally mean addressing the various facets of piracy, namely geopolitical components, regional components, legal components, and operational pieces as well. The increase in the number of insurgents in Somalia is of great worry, particularly with regards to the fight against terrorism. If we don't approach this problem carefully, through thoughtful tactics, there is a great probability that Somalia could fall into the hands of groups like Al-Shabaab and become a haven for terrorists. If we aren't careful, the same environment that allowed the spike in piracy could contribute to becoming a breeding ground for terrorists. The issue of piracy in Somalia is a complex one of economics and politics, and not one where really this presence of a multinational coalition of warships can ensure the safety of sailors in the region. So there you have it. Good luck, and as I mentioned, get with me if you have any questions, okay? Take care.